Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I've done flight attendant stories, but I don't know why I haven't told you this story yet. The other day I was having a chat with a friend and I was like, yeah, that time that we had a death on board. And she goes, what? And I was like, yeah. And then I realized it was kind of a big deal because how many times does anyone experience a death on a flight? I've actually had 2 deaths on board. One was in my first year of flying and then the other one was in my 5th year of flying. The second one actually happened before we took off. It was during boarding, so it was a very different scenario from the first one. This video is about that time the first death happened on board. Let's go. I was in my first year of flying and I remember distinctly that it was a flight to London which took off in the middle of the night. We were flying on a Boeing 777-300, which means that it was quite a large plane. Anyway, it was the middle of the night and we left for London. I'm pretty sure the service that we did was a main meal service. After takeoff, we start a service which includes serving a hot meal. We did a drink service, so you serve the drinks with some biscuits and then you serve the main meal. And then you do a round of tea and coffee, and then after that you do clearance, which means that you clear the cabin of trays, and then you do the final clearance, which is where you do a round where you collect any remaining rubbish that's on people's tray tables. And then that's the end of it. The other thing that I remember about that flight was that it was pretty empty. The flight was only 1/4 full, so there were a lot of empty seats. After a service happens on a flight that takes off in the middle of the night, we dim the lights so that everyone can go to sleep. The lights were dimmed and myself and this other girl, we were walking from the back galley, you know, like the kitchen type area, to the mid galley. On busy flights, all of these galleys are filled with carts of food and whatnot. They're generally pretty full, but because this was an empty flight, this galley really didn't have a lot of food in it. Yes, another girl and I were walking from the back galley to the mid galley, and as we were walking, someone shouted, "Hey!" My colleague went to him. At the same time that he was like, "Hey," another call bell went off. I went off to the other call. And then she shouted out, she's like, "Help!" So I was like, okay, so I get there, the man is having a seizure. What we're meant to do is if any medical scenario happens, especially a serious one, you're supposed to call your senior. So I ran to the back, there's a phone at the back, every door has a phone, and I got on the interphone and I rang for the senior flight stewardess. And I said, "We need help. It's an emergency. A man's having a seizure." So anyway, she came down. Everything happened so quickly. We all went there, and by the time that we got to him, he'd already stopped having a seizure and then he went back into another one. This man had a total of 7 seizures. Like, seizure, pause for like 10 minutes, another seizure, pause for another 10 minutes, and it was like that. In between the seizures, we took him out of his chair and took him to the mid galley. Luckily, in a row of 3 seats, he was the only one sitting there because he was about 200 pounds, about 6 foot tall. So we took him into the galley. By now he would have had about, I think, like 4 seizures. I was so scared. There's a few roles that need to be filled. Everyone's trained to do CPR. We also need someone who communicates, someone who actually communicates what is happening in the scenario and communicates with the cockpit. And we also have contact to ground medical services. Then we also have someone who does crowd control. For me, I didn't know what sort of role I was going to take. I just said that I would do crowd control. The crazy thing is, in and amongst this, it actually surprised me that no one was aware that this was actually happening, despite the fact that we paged for medical help. We did page for medical help and we did get help. When you do CPR, we have a rule, like you do CPR for 45 minutes or until the plane lands. We had performed CPR for a while. I hadn't gotten involved. I was paranoid that someone else was gonna have a heart attack or be ill in that time. I was like walking the aircraft, doing rounds like crazy. So many of the crew in economy were in that space. I mean, one of the things we weren't meant to do was crowd the situation and for the rest of the cabin to be unattended. Because I was paranoid that something else was gonna happen, I was doing the rounds around economy. I was super duper alert. We did CPR for more than 45 minutes. Even though it says that we go for 45 minutes, we went on for a while. We used the defib, you know, the machine that you put on the casualty and it's a shock. Yeah, we used that. After that, he passed away. So he had a total of 7 seizures. We still had half of the flight to go, and probably 2 or 3 other passengers were aware that something was not normal, and they were the ones sitting by the galley. No one really caused a kerfuffle. Anyway, when that happens, we actually have a mortality kit on board. It's a kit that you use for when situations like this happen. So there's a bag, there is I don't even remember what's in a mortality kit anymore. One thing that I do remember, you know, in the movies you see these bags and then people zip up, you know, close the zip. On the plane, we're not to declare anyone dead. So you're not to close it all the way up. You can only close it up to here, and it's for the paramedics to declare death when we land. So then we landed. We had already called for paramedics. When you get in touch with the medical services on ground, they know by the time that you land that paramedics need to come on board. So before everyone disembarked, we had to let the paramedics come on board. I just remember the man was flying by himself. He was flying from Entebbe, so he had gone from Entebbe to Dubai, and then he was going from Dubai to London. We found this out because we had to take his documents, and I remember just feeling this kind of, I preferred not to know. I didn't know that it would have this impact on me, but it's like, when it was happening, it was a situation happening to a human who was having medical issues. You don't know any history about them. But then when we started looking at his documents, understanding how old he was, where he was traveling, it was almost like getting a bit of a connection to that person who had just passed away. I didn't like the feeling. Yeah. I didn't like the feeling, just because for me, I just started thinking about what life he had, why he was going from Entebbe, what he was going to do in London, what about his parents. I preferred not to know. We didn't need to know. It was just something that happened because, you know, we took the documents. After that, we landed in London. We had the paramedics come on board. They collected the body. We had to stay there and answer some questions, and then after that we went to the hotel. By the time we got to the hotel, it must have been about 2 or 3 hours after we landed. I don't remember. All I remember was being super exhausted. It was super long day, because when a death happens on board, what do you do after the plane lands? It was a very somber mood. We said, okay, what are we gonna do? I didn't really feel like going to the groceries, but I didn't also want to be in my room by myself, so I went with the crew. We all went to the groceries, and then that was that. We went back to Dubai, and then after that we did get called into headquarters. They offer like counseling. I didn't take any counseling. I just went straight back to work because I thought, I'm fine, I can just go. So I went straight back to work. I didn't go for any therapy, nothing, no counseling. So I felt like it was something that happened. It was like a tough situation, and then I went back to work. I didn't realize that it actually impacted me, because every year you do like your safety exams, including first aid exams. You have to do CPR. So the next year I went to my yearly exams, and when I was doing the count, I got super emotional, and then I just started crying. So I didn't actually think that it had much of an impact on me until I was back in the situation, in a mock situation, and it sort of like came back to me. That was the death on board that I had. I don't know if you guys had any expectations of this story, or if you have any questions. If you do, you can pop them in the comment section down below. But I hope that answers some of your questions around what happens with deaths on board. I guess this was also pretty unique because the guy was traveling on his own, so we didn't have family to have to talk to and explain. A little bit of a different tone to my other stories, but I know some of you guys have asked about this because I mentioned it in one of my previous flight attendant stories. Has anyone else here experienced that? If so, like, how did it go? I don't really have a lot of other people to compare this experience to, because it's very unusual. This sounds strange, but if you like this episode, give it a thumbs up. Feels a bit weird to say that. If you are new to my channel and you've not subscribed, go ahead, subscribe. I've got a lot of other videos similar to this. Actually, similar but not. They're actually more on the funny side of things. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week. In the meantime, have a good day. 1 second. 1 second. Bye.